Okay, today I thought I'd teach you how to make something fairly basic in Houdini, this cushion here. This is done using simulation, using Houdini systems called Vellum. It also involves doing a few other things in Houdini that would be a useful introduction, I think. So we're going to start off. This is Houdini. This is actually Houdini Apprentice, which you can download for free, which is their training version of Houdini. Houdini has a viewport where you can see what you're creating, and over here it has another window with a graph in it, and it's a graph-based system like Substance Designer. There's also a window here that shows properties of each of these nodes. So I'll start with a new file. So here we have a new file in Houdini. So we're going to make a cushion, and first we'll put down a geometry node because we're going to make a cushion out of geometry. I'll call it cushion 01. Now if I double click on this, I go inside the cushion node. So this we're going to add to the inside of this geometry node to create the final cushion. You can create other nodes other than geometry nodes if you were doing other things like particle systems or various kinds of other simulation. So first I'm going to make a box. I hit tab and then I add a box node by typing box in here, and it comes up under the little list of suggestions here. So this is the box properties here on the right. Mostly we just want to make it cushiony shaped, so we're making a rectangular cushion as you saw earlier, like the sort of one you get on a piece of furniture. So we'll make this, say, 10 long. Five wide. Actually, let's make that half that size. So we'll make it like, there we go, 5 by 3. And we'll squeeze it down a little bit, 0.5 units high. Okay, now we have a box. We're going to adjust the division. So 2 divisions means how many lines it has in it. So we want to make the height divisions twice as many, because we're already going to use half the box. Now I'm going to add a node called a null. This doesn't really do anything. I'm just going to use it as a sort of a bookmark. I'm going to call it, in all caps, base box. Okay, now that I have my base box, we're going to delete all the polygons below this line. First we need to use a group node. This will create a selection. And at first it will just select everything. We're going to turn off base group and it selects nothing, but turn on keep in bounding regions, and you get this box here. So every face that's inside this box is going to be selected. So in order to make the box the right size, I'm going to use something called linked properties. And to do that, we go right click on the X parameter and select copy parameter. Go down here, click on the X size and do paste relative references. Now you can see it's exactly the same shape in X. If we click in this little text box here, we can add times 1.5. Now you can see that the box is 1.5 times the length of the original box. So now if we go change this, it changes along with it. So I then do the same thing to the Z parameter times 1.5. And here, for the height, I can go copy parameter and instead of putting it in the height here, I'll put it in the center position. But put some brackets in. So it moves down, and now you can see it's only selecting the bottom of this box. And we'll call the group, give the group a name, we'll call this delete group. Now, I want to add a blast node. Blast is basically delete. At first it deletes everything, but if I select I put the name in the wrong spot. But if I select delete group, now we have a box that's got no base. Now we want to smooth it to give it a rounded cushion shape. So what I'll do is I'll add a divide node first. Actually, how about we add a subdivide node first, so we can see what we're doing. This is smoothed the box, but it doesn't look very good. Even if we increase it, it looks too round. That's because we want to add some subdivisions so that it doesn't smooth it out so much. And we'll do that with the divide node. Turn off convex polygons and ignore all that. Turn on Bricker polygons. Now if we look at so in Houdini, to look at the effect of a node, you click on it and select the little blue icon. So here we go. We set these all to be 0.5. It'll give us nice square subdivisions. So when we go to the subdivide node, you can see that it's nice and smooth. Now, because we're going to simulate this, we don't want it to have square polygons like this. So what we'll do is we'll place another node, remesh, and remesh converts it all to little tiny polygons. But we want even smaller than that, so 0.5, there you go. Pretty small. Pretty good. So we're just about done with the shape of the fabric. One more thing we want to do is start on the buttons. First we'll create a sphere. If you look at it by itself, classic sphere, we will change it to a polygon sphere like this because it has a better distribution, looks a bit nicer, but up it 8, and we want it to be squashed like a button. So we put down a transform node. And scale it 0.5. In height, and maybe scale it down a lot because it's got to be button sized. Now if you want to see more than two things at once, like in this case I want to see where the fabric is, we can go back and select template, which is the pink icon down on the right here. And it comes in a sort of ghostly fashion. So I want to copy this button to roughly the shape of this. So to do that, first I'll get an object merge node. And this is why I put this null in here. We'll reference the base box node. So this just brings box back. We don't want it to go all the way to the edges though, because we don't want the buttons sitting sort of on the edges weirdly. So we'll put in a transform node again. Connect it up. Scale it down a little bit. Uniform scale, 0.8. That's good. Now, we're going to copy the sphere to a bunch of points we make using this box. So we want to make the points. So we want a points from volume node. This makes a lot of points, but we don't need that many. So we'll up the point separation so they're really far apart. Now, I'll just turn off the other thing. You can see the points are in a grid. Cushions like this tend to have them in sort of a hexagonal pattern. Well, not hexagonal, but a diamond, I guess, pattern. So we can turn that to tetrahedral there. That just automatically gives us like this offset. Now this is something you do a lot of in Houdini. Use the copy to points node. We have the thing we want to copy over here, which is the button, and the points that we just made. Now, bam, we have a bunch of buttons. We might want them a bit further apart, so we will go 0.6 point separation. Maybe 0.7. That might be too much. We'll have a look. Yeah, I think that's too much. We'll move it to 0.6. And maybe with this transform, too far. Now in Houdini, you can middle click on a thing and get different scrolling factors. So I'm middle clicking and scrolling with my mouse. We'll leave it like that. So now that we've got these buttons, we want to move them. Because it's a simulation, we want to move them out of the way of the fabric and then push them down into it in an animated fashion. So I'll put in another transform node. And if I click over here, show handle, I can just drag this up here so I know how high off the surface it is. Now here's the thing, if you want to animate in Houdini, I'll round this off to 0.35 just to be neat. If you want to animate in Houdini, you can set keys on any of these values, and the way to do that is you hold down Alt and click and it goes green. Now you have a key set there. Now we want to make these sink down into the fabric, so I'll move the time slider down the bottom here to say 50, and then move these down so they're almost all the way in, and Alt left click to set the key. So now if we move time slider up and down, we've got to move up and down. So that is almost everything we need to do. We'll just go to the simulation. So first we need to set up Vellum. And to do that, first we need a settings. In this case, Vellum configure cloth. This goes in the left, that's the geometry. And this is the collision, goes in the right. Now this has a bunch of settings, but first we'll attach all the nodes and then we'll fiddle with the settings. So you can see what happens. So the next node we need is a Vellum solver. And this does the actual calculations that makes the cloth go. So we'll just stop here now. If I hit play, the cloth just falls down out of the screen. There it is, down the bottom there, looking like a cloth. So first thing we want to do, we want to go back here and create, in fact, we won't even need to go back here. We go back to our delete group. You can hold down Alt and drag on a node to copy it. And then if we just jam it in here, it reconnects it. We're going to rename this pinned points, because these are going to points, because these are going to be the points that stay still. This, of course, is going to be points, so we need to change the group type to be points. Now it's not getting anything because it's a little bit below the, we've deleted all the points that this is encompassing. So what we do is we go in here and put times 0.9 Now we've got some points. But I think maybe 9, 8. There you go. Just the very edge. We've got just the very edges in this group. Now to tell the solver to use those points, we'll go here to the Vellum cloth. Right here it says pin points. We select pin points. Now, if we go back to the solver and run the simulation, those points don't move. The cloth still goes down. So to fix the cloth falling, and because we want to puff up the pillow, what we're going to do is we're going to add some forces. In fact, we're going to add wind. Now, you could just punch in a number here, but I always like to animate the wind. And here's the thing. Because it's going to try to solve it if we drag the time slider around, what I'm going to do is going to press Control B over the window here, and it makes the window bigger. So now, like with the transform, I'll click on the wind to set a 0 keyframe here, drag to say 50, where we know the buttons are going to be, set the wind to, we've got gravity going down at minus 9.8, which is standard acceleration. We'll have the wind going up at 10 at this point. So now the wind value goes up and down, and then this is also handy because we're going to, having the wind, you might want to see what it looks like at different strengths of wind, so we'll just put the wind back down to 0 at say 90. So again, I'll click to set the key. Now if I go back to 0 and hit Control B to get my window back, hit play, it sags down, but then it puffs back up. And we're almost there. So this cushion looks a bit too much on the smooth side. So we go into the cloths constraints setup, and the one thing that I always change is the bend stiffness. Bend stiffness is always too high to look realistic. I always like to put it down to at least here. So we'll start here. This is going down in sets of 10, so even less stiff. Generally, I only ever just adjust this. Maybe I add stiffness as a number for very fine tuning, but it's not really necessary. So now if we go back to the solver, hit play, it's looking a little bit better. Good thing to do is also up the damping, which means that it'll not flop around as much. Just a tiny amount, because you've lowered the stiffness, so you don't want it to, you want to sort of balance it out. Now to get more wrinkles, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the stretch. The thing I'm going to adjust here is the rest length scale. You've got to be very sort of subtle with this, so I'm going to add 0.5, so the cloth is going to be a very small amount larger. Try to go to a small amount larger size than it actually the actual geometry starts at. So if we hit play, there you go. Looking a bit better. Now, so we've got some wrinkles around the side here. It's kind of puffing up in a realistic looking way. Maybe I'll go back here to the copy points, and I'll make the scale in X a little bit bigger. To get some buttons on the end, just so I've got full coverage. So, to get even more wrinkles and more realistic looking fabric, it's always a good idea to start out with fairly large polygons, because the simulation works on a per polygon basis. The more polygons, the longer it takes you to get a result. But what we'll do is get our remesh. We'll set this down to 0.2, which gives us pretty small polygons. Now, if we hit play, running through the simulation, as I said, the more polygons, the slower it goes. So it's sort of working its way up. And we'll stop it there. This is a bit weird looking. It's kind of gone in the middle here. What we'll do is we'll add another thing to this. We'll add a ground. Now this just adds an invisible ground plane, so you don't have to. See, it's added this blue square. Now, when we run the solution, hit play, it just flops down, but it doesn't go below the ground plane. That'll make the wind apply a bit more evenly, and there you go. Still does a bit of a flop on the side, but it's a simulation. That's kind of how they work. You just let it work itself out. Okay. So now we have the fabric. Looks pretty good, I guess. What we want to do is we want to add the buttons back in again. So we need a merge node. This combines geometry together. We'll put a null in, and we'll call this all caps, and put this here at the end of all the button stuff. Now here we'll put in object merge and click on this little here, and because it's in caps it comes out at the top. Merge it in. Now if we click on the merge node, turn off the preview here, we've got a pretty finished looking cushion top. One other thing we can do that'll help a little bit is put in a Vellum post process. This does a bunch of features that are often useful, but we're only going to use one of them, which is we're going to subdivide the resulting vellum mesh a little bit and give it a tiny bit of blur. That can help smooth things out, and we'll attach all the constraints and collision. You don't need to do that for this, but if you want to use this post-process node for other things, such as detangle, it's more important. So now we have a cushion. Looks pretty good so far. No bottom, so we're just going to kind of cheat and put another transform node in. Rotate it 180, and then use another merge node to combine the transform node. So then you've just got a copy of the same thing on the bottom. This is obviously a fairly basic tutorial, but I often do small basic things like this to help with modeling. One thing here is these buttons are kind of sitting up a little high, a little oddly, so we'll just put in a transform node in between this merge node and just sink them down a tiny amount. Let's just go 0.1. Oh, it's too far, so there you go, 0.02. So that's made a cushion. Now you can use Vellum for an awful lot of other things, but this is just a basic sort of tutorial to get people used to it, and also includes a few more basic things that you might want to do in Houdini.